Neurodiversity Celebration Week began in 2018 as a grassroots school campaign created by neurodiversity advocate Sienna Castellon, who was just 16 years old. Sienna's autistic, dyslexic, dyspraxic, and ADHD, and the campaign grew directly from her lived experience of being misunderstood, underestimated and bullied at school. Sienna's aim was clear. She wanted to flip the narrative away from deficit-based thinking and towards recognising the strengths and talents and potential of neurodivergent students and school kids. This was her response to being mislabelled and mistreated by teachers and peers, and to the real harm that stigma causes. The word celebration was intentional, designed to be uplifting, empowering, and student-centred, and a rejection of the idea that neurodivergence is something to be fixed. For the first few years, Neurodiversity Celebration Week was free and simple. The original campaign was aimed only at schools. It used free, downloadable resources. It encouraged student-led participation and required no corporate sponsorship or consultancy. Schools used to just sign up on the website. They'd receive posters, assembly scripts, lesson plans, activity ideas, and the teachers were encouraged to highlight strengths and challenge misconceptions and celebrate neurodivergent role models. The tone was DIY, grassroots, and very youth-led. The platform was shared by pupils and teachers, not by corporates, and that context matters. But as Sienna grew up, the campaign grew too, and its focus expanded beyond schools and universities and into the corporate world of neurodiversity inclusion at work. It went from being grassroots and about students to being all about corporates and how to harness and exploit the talents, basically, of neurodivergent people at work. Very little about how to appreciate us for who we are and celebrate us as human beings.
I think the thing that stands out to me is it's become quite emblematic of a lot of the sort of pride movements and celebrations of marginalized groups where, what starts arguably as an act of protest and refusal to be ashamed kind of gets turned into a commodity to be sold and used to increase people's bottom line. And I think that's one of the things that I've struggled with Neurodiversity Celebration Week in recent years, and it's why I was keen to do this webinar today. So much of it has been taken over by that sort of corporate reach and the drive to just turn it into another source of productivity and profit.
You spoke at one of my events, didn't you? One of the Neurodiversity Celebration Week events that I chaired. The 2 years that I was asked to take part and chair panels, I filled it with my friends, most of which are the likes of David, who is not a kind of capitalist, let's exploit everyone for productivity, and way more about accepting and celebrating human beings for who they are. But what we've noticed is that those authentic grassroots voices are becoming fewer and further between. What happened in 2022 is Sienna partnered with Lexic, a private company. They basically said, we'll host the Neurodiversity Celebration Week website and we'll help you to market and coordinate the events. So that's how it started. They are one of the big players in the UK neurodiversity consultancy scene. They did support it, but then she ultimately handed the reins over. So the first year that she was away at university in Stanford, she was still involved to a certain extent. But what we saw that year was more and more Lexic saying, I want certain places on these panels to go to my corporate clients and partners. And it became more and more corporate. So now it's evolved into something that largely focuses on neurodiversity inclusion at work, or rather on selling corporate neurodiversity inclusion consultancy. And it has corporate partnerships, polished marketing campaigns, and a lot of commercial activity. Now, that growth is not automatically a problem. Movements will evolve, but this celebration, it was once rooted in lived experience, and it's becoming increasingly commercial. So we have to ask, is the original spirit of Neurodiversity Week still being honoured? Because if this celebration centres corporate organisations more than it does neurodivergent people, it stops being a celebration. It starts being a branding exercise. Companies trying to make themselves look good, they're ticking some boxes, and reach increased. So the year that I spoke and David was one of the guests on the panel that I chaired, there were 6,000 people watching, and that wasn't even one of the more popular sessions. And there was a full week worth of these panel events. And on top of that, there were lots of events going on, some of them community led, many of them corporate. So people were getting paid a lot of money, really, to speak about neurodiversity during Neurodiversity Celebration Week, including me. Last year, what I noticed is that it wasn't as popular. Some of the key players in the neurodiversity scene had already had enough. Sienna was no longer involved. It was all a bit last minute, but you were still getting 2,000 to 3,000 people at most of the events. And I did one last year about acquired neurodivergence. They wanted me to do something really corporate, but I wanted to platform my friends who have got the types of neurodivergence that the corporates don't normally want to talk about. But then this year, Lexic have done very little and they've marketed it very little. But in my view, Neurodiversity Celebration Week moved significantly away from its roots, and many members of the neurodivergent community that it was created to celebrate no longer feel centred. I have had some speaking events, nothing like last year. I've created a series of videos with 8 neurodivergent lived experience speakers from the Speakers Collective, which is a very grassroots speaker community that David and I are both in. It's all about challenging stigma and speaking from lived experience to combat the stigma and the misconceptions. It's been much quieter than last year, but I can live with that because squeezing 2 months worth of speaking events into 1 week was exhausting. But I continue to support organisations who are committed to acceptance, appreciation and inclusion for their neurodivergent employees, their supply chain, their customers. But I mean genuinely committed, not performative box ticking, not inclusion washing. Neurodivergent humans must not be reduced to a productivity hack to boost profits. The neurodiversity movement aims to tackle barriers to inclusion. We want to reduce power imbalances, not reinforce them. We're not here to make rich people richer and be another cog in the capitalist machine. And if your organisation wants to celebrate neurodiversity, the work cannot stop at awareness events. Although neurodiversity inclusion speakers such as myself and David can share actionable strategies and framework, we can show you examples of how it's done. We can open your eyes, but we can't do your legwork, especially if what you need is a significant organisational culture change, if it's a really neuronormative culture that you're working in. You can't outsource inclusion to a speaker. You have to bake it into your working practices and environments and policies, processes, systems, and expectations. Committing to communicating clearly, to allowing us to flex our working hours, person-centred adjustments, universal design, compassion and patience, letting us lean into our strengths. It can make a huge difference if we can respect our differing human needs and we can actually express those needs. Universal accessibility, this is about designing for the minority and it benefits the majority. So things like allowing captions on your PowerPoint, sending out interview questions in advance. I don't just mean to autistic people, do that for everyone. It will help everyone. Person-centered adjustments rather than assumptions. If you say, for example, autistic people don't have to turn their cameras on in a Teams meeting, that's working on the assumption that they don't want their cameras on, but some of us don't mind. So you've got to be able to have an open and honest conversation with the person, appreciate our strengths and let us lean into them. So this can be to do with our objectives, it can be in the way our jobs are designed or the way that our jobs evolved over time. I'm really lucky because I worked in HR for 20 years, but I was able to help shape my job so that I could always add value. I worked in HR, but on the more technical and analytical and project management side of it. So I don't have the tact and diplomacy to deal with employee relations issues, and I wouldn't want to. And I've never wanted to climb the management hierarchy. I've always wanted to differentiate by being a subject matter expert and a thought leader. If you show us patience and compassion with the things we struggle with, then you deserve us at our best. And we need to not pressure people to disclose, create an environment where we feel safe to disclose if we want to. We shouldn't have to, because we should be able to talk about our needs and wants and preferences, and we should be protected from discrimination and mockery and worse. But if we genuinely create an environment where we actually are safe, then we may want to disclose anyway, giving neurodivergent people a voice. So letting us speak for ourselves. I want to celebrate people, not productivity. I want to support people, not marketing campaigns. Let's centre lived experience, even if it doesn't fit neatly into corporate narratives, because neurodivergent people are not just a theme for a week. We're part of your workforce, your communities, your families, and your future, the future of work. So let's keep celebrating neurodivergence, but on our own terms. Let's reclaim Neurodiversity Celebration Week for us, the neurodivergent community. When I say neurodivergent, I mean anyone whose mind functions in a way that diverges significantly from the dominant societal standards of normal. That's how Nick Walker defined it in her book, Neuroqueer Heresies. They were one of the pioneers of the neurodiversity movement. This explicitly includes mental health differences as well. It isn't just about innate neurodivergence that we're born with, like autism and ADHD. And it will include even things like changes due to menopause or accident-related brain injury, Parkinson's, long COVID. There's so many ways that we can function in a way that's different from what society expects and deems to be
And
normal.
you've got the innate neurodivergence that is stigmatized and discriminated against, like autism, ADHD, Tourette's, specific learning disabilities. You've then got the innate neurodivergence that you're born with it, but it's not necessarily discriminated against, such as synesthesia and things like that. You then have acquired neurodivergence, which is something I talk about a lot. And the first type of acquired neurodivergence is the ones that you acquire through your interaction with wider human ecosystem and perhaps the traumas that you've experienced. So that would be things like me being schizophrenic is a form of acquired neurodivergence.
And my complex PTSD.
Yeah, but one that doesn't get talked about often at all, and I know it's a significant focus of Nick's work, is intentionally acquired neurodivergence through neuroqueer practice, the use of psychedelic substances,
And
intentional
meditation.
acts to queer one's own neurology, and change one's own neurocognitive style. So neurodivergence, as defined by Cassiana Sasumas, in reality, when you think about it, there are probably way more neurodivergent people out there when you think about the breadth of what that word means. Then there are those performing neurotypicality, because neurotypicality isn't a neurocognitive style, it's a performance of normal, in inverted commas. And neurodivergence, being neurodivergent, is a socio-political identity. It's not a buzzword to get more people into your office and, producing more profit. It's a socio-political identity defined by its distance from those normative forms of oppression.
I always do a bit of a wry smile when someone introduces themselves as neurotypical, because it's not a neurotype, it's a satirical term the autism community came up with to flip the narrative on describing the way that our brains are wired. There's something wrong with us. So it isn't a real thing. It just means the absence of any neurodivergence, I think. These are just differences. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. Like, I've been misjudged all my life for traits of autism, even by other people that are probably neurodivergent as well in hindsight, but they've just been brought up really neuronormatively. My early 20s, I had a boyfriend that noticed every little idiosyncrasy about me and how I communicated, how I moved and everything, and made me feel crappy about it. So when I discovered I was autistic and I discovered the neurodiversity paradigm, I decided I'm not broken, I'm wired differently, metaphorically yeeted him into the sun.